everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester with Mike Teglier, as always. Tags, I knotted up the score at 1 apiece last week thanks to my quote-unquote reaching for Dak Prescott in round 2. Today's the rubber match. Are you ready for this?
I am so ready for this, Bobby. This is now the third draft I'm doing in the last 10 minutes because the drafts, they seem to continue filling. But this one, actually, I have the best pick that I've gotten so far. I got pick number 3. Where are you at?
Tags, I've got the 8th pick. It seems like every time we do this, you get really lucky. So I've already got a built-in excuse. So what we're doing, we're going to do a draft on draft.com/pros. It's a 10-person draft like the drafts we did at the start of our season-long leagues. 5 rounds. And we need a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, or tight ends. Tags is doing it on the app. I'm using the website. Both are really easy to use. And you can find the app on Google Play or the App Store by just typing draft. It's going to show up first. And we have a promo code for you. Deposit using draft.com/pros. That's PROS. And you'll get free money back up to $100 for your deposit. Again, that's draft.com/pros. PROS.
All right. So, Bobby, I am on the clock with the first pick here. Oh, the third pick. But Kareem Hunt just fell into my lap. My number 1 player on the week. I happen to get it number 3. So I think this got off to a fantastic start.
No, it did not. No, I'm not happy unless Todd Gurley drops to me. If Todd Gurley drops to me, I will have no complaints. And right now it's at pick 5. These things move really fast, Tags. We're going to be done with this draft in probably about 5 minutes. It's 5 rounds. Antonio Brown was just taking 3 more picks, and then Todd Gurley, baby.
One of the drafts, I should let you guys know. So it's really neat because it varies, right? In one draft that I did, Deshaun Watson went number 2 overall. Like, someone did that, and it was free money because I got Todd Gurley. I got Todd Gurley and Julio Jones at pick 9 and 10, or 10 and 11 because I was in the turn. I was beyond stoked about that because I have Todd Gurley as a top 4 running back this week, and Julio Jones is my number 1 wide receiver. So I'm pretty psyched.
Did you see that Todd Gurley just dropped to me?
I did. Todd Gurley at number 8 is pretty solid. I mean, I'll take Kareem Hunt at number 3, but you're going to have another pick before it comes back to me. And I think that the last show we did, I want to say that I had the number 8 pick and you had what was it? What number did you have last week?
Nobody knows. I don't remember.
Nobody knows. Oh, wait, hold on a second. I had number 1 last week. You had number 3.
I was going to say you had number 1 because you got Le'Veon Bell again with the lucky thing.
That's right. I've been doing so many of these drafts, guys. It's quite addicting, actually. You kind of just go through and you do a draft and you're like, that took 5 minutes. Let me do another one. And it's like until the baby wakes up from his nap. Yeah, it's really simple. It's fun because, I mean, there's been a lot of injuries, as you know, Bobby, and in football. So if someone's season-long team is out, let's say that they play DFS, but they want something different, this is a snake draft where you're able to draft a new team every single week. And I mean, you could do contests as low as $5.
Okay, so I'm back up here in the second round, and I'm going to take CJ Anderson. I'm going 2 running backs back to back. Tags, who are you hoping is going to drop to you?
I was hoping CJ Anderson was going to drop. That obviously did not happen. And it's at the weird.
Do you think I reached for him there at 2.3 though?
No, I wouldn't say you reached for him. No, because I mean he was going to be gone by the time he got to me. So honestly, I'm at this weird point in the draft where it's like I don't like being at the end of the second round because like all of like the top 5 receivers are gone, top 5 running backs. I don't really want to reach for a quarterback if I don't have to. I might go quarterback at 3-3 just because I know that you're going to take one and it's going to kind of handcuff me. But right now I'm looking at my board and it's tough because Mike Evans is still there and I'm on the board.
Don't do it, Tags. Don't pick Mike Evans against Patrick Peterson.
It's either that or I go Brandon Cooks. I can't pass up Mike Evans. Like, I'll take the chance at a touchdown here. Last year he did score a touchdown against Patrick Peterson, so I'm going to bank on that maybe happening again.
I'm so glad you took him. I mean, it's not good for our show because everyone's going to see you pick Mike Evans and he's going to get like 2 points or whatever, but it's good for me beating you.
He's going to get like 2 points. I debated Brandon Cooks. Not going to lie there.
Brandon Cooks could go off for 30 this week, man. Like there's a chance he just wins this league for someone.
And it's very possible that I take him on the way back because there's 3 picks before me. Deshaun Watson just went. So there's 3 more picks and he might still be there. So I might just go Brandon Cooks to pair with Mike Evans and take the upside in these 2 wide receivers.
That's who I'd take too. I thought about not telling you that because then you'd be like, oh, maybe I won't pick him and he'll get back around to me and then I could get him. But that's the best pick. I'm
sticking to my guns here. I'm not going to take a quarterback. Okay, Drew Brees just went and he's like my favorite quarterback anyways. So I'm not going to feel pressure to take a quarterback just because Brandon Cooks just
baby,
went.
yes.
Oh my God, no, I'm not happy about it. Man, this is tough because Jordan Howard's on the board. I think I'm going to go Jordan Howard just because Brandon Williams for the Ravens seems like he might be out again. We don't know for certain. Man, I was literally about to click Brandon Cooks. Yeah, I'm going to go with Jordan Howard here because I need a workhorse running back. If you don't get the workhorse running backs, then you're going to be sitting there staring at someone like, Alvin Kamara, who's not a bad play, but it's also not a lock.
So I'm looking at my options here, and I could go quarterback. There's quite a few quarterbacks I like this week, but some I like a bit more than others. If Kirk Cousins is there, I think I got to pull the trigger, face San Francisco. He was just taken. Matt Ryan's still on the board against Miami. I think that's a safe play coming off the bye. I still need 2 wide receivers, though, or a tight end, so... looks like Matt Ryan was just taken, so that makes my decision a lot easier. I'm going to go over and look at the wide receivers. We've got Demaryius Thomas. He's probably going to be matched up against Janoris Jenkins quite a bit. Larry Fitzgerald's a nice play. Golden Tate is safe against New Orleans. Chris Hogan against the Jets. I think I got to go Chris Hogan. I don't especially like Chris Hogan, but he's still there, so I guess he's my guy.
Hogan would have been the next wide receiver on my board, so I have no issue with that play. It's weird. And so I want to say I agree with you. It's like, when I was going through the primer this week and looking at Chris Hogan compared to a lot of other wide receivers, he's been one of the most consistent wide receivers in football. And, I know that the yardage totals aren't bonkers. He's not getting you 125, 150-yard games like someone like maybe like a Mike Evans or a Brandon Cooks, but Chris Hogan has been a very steady, consistent performer. So as long as you have some upside options to pair with Chris Hogan, I'm more than okay with that. And there goes Matthew Stafford, which was who I was hoping to fall to me. I feel like I'm going to be regretting this whole waiting on a quarterback thing again.
I really want Tyreek Hill. I've got 2 more picks until he gets to me, and I'm really crossing my fingers that he's still there because he's got that upside. Otherwise, I'm taking Golden Tate. So Doug Martin was taken right before me. So Tyreek Hill it is.
Dang, I didn't want to say anything because he was on my board as someone I really wanted to grab. I felt like he was a good play. With Chris Conley out for the year, we don't know if Travis Kelce is playing at this time when we're doing this draft. So it's very possible that Tyreek Hill sees tons of targets, and he's playing against a Pittsburgh defense that runs a lot of zone defense, so that he should be able to find some holes in there. There could be some miscommunication. Tyreek Hill's got some massive upside this week.
There's 3 quarterbacks I still like left. We both still need a quarterback. So I'm hoping you don't take my guy. You probably will, though.
I legitimately just clicked on Devontae Adams to put him in my queue, and someone drafted him. Oh, my God. So looking at, I'm up in a few picks here, and I'm running out of options at quarterback 1 because it's now down to Carson Palmer in my rankings. I have Palmer there. I have Rivers because... let's be real. Breeze, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, Watson, Brady, Stafford, I think even Cam Newton. No, wait, Cam Newton's not part of this draft because we're doing a Sunday through Monday draft. So
man, Jay made it to 4.5. That is a steal.
Yeah, it's not bad for a workhorse running back there. Definitely not bad. All right, so I'm on the clock, and it's choosing between Carson Palmer and Phillip Rivers for me. I'm going to go with Palmer just because I think that they don't have a run game, right? And the Tampa Bay defense is really struggling. It looks like they might get 3 starters back on defense, but at the same time, I think there's some safety there just because of how little they're able to run the ball.
Palmer's who I was hoping for. If not, then Rivers. After that, man, I'll tell you what, it is quite ugly. I guess I could go Jameis Winston at Arizona. I really don't want to because I think that they're just going to run the ball a lot against Arizona. Oh, man, I'm really hoping that he drops to me, Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, now I'm really torn because, do I go upside or do I go safety here? Because, I'm sitting here, I really like Terrell Pryor. But at the same time, Larry Fitzgerald is there. Larry Fitzgerald is like the definition of safety versus Tampa Bay. I already have Carson Palmer, so do I pair him? Is that like a good strategy? I like them both
this week.
I do too, but at the same time, it's like, do I want to overexpose myself? I have Mike Evans, who is in that game as well, so I'm almost game stacking here at this point. Deshaun Jackson's available. But yeah, I'm going Pryor just because I want the upside. If Larry Fitzgerald goes off, that means I'm getting it from Carson Palmer. So I'm going with my gut here. I'm going to take Terrell Pryor.
Good call.
Yeah, I don't... This it's weird. This team is I'm not opposed to. I have Carson Palmer, Kareem Hunt, Jordan Howard, Mike Evans, and Terrell Pryor, which is not a bad team by any means. I think I like some of the other ones I drafted better because, as I've mentioned, I've done 3 of these drafts in the last 10 minutes.
All right, 1 pick away from me, and then I get Phillip Rivers, and he dropped. Oh, man, this draft worked out really well for me. I don't especially like the Chris Hogan pick in the 3rd. I think he was the best player available. That's why I took him. And these drafts move fast enough where you can make a mistake. The more practice you do, the better you get, so it's to your advantage. But I like my team and how it turned out. And interestingly enough, I am not ranked very high. They give you a projection at the end. I'm projected for 67.2. Tags for 73. I like my team a lot better than yours, Tags.
It's fair enough. And like I said, this isn't my favorite team I've drafted, but I also feel pretty good. If Mike Evans can score a touchdown and put up 60 yards, I'm going to be more than happy with this lineup. Yeah, Carson Palmer against Tampa Bay, solid play. Kareem Hunt is my number one running back on the week. Jordan Howard against Baltimore. I really need Brandon Williams to miss because that's like the key to Jordan Howard doing good this week. And I have Mike Evans and Terrell Pryor.
So I've got Phillip Rivers at Oakland, Todd Gurley at Jacksonville, CJ Anderson faced the Giants, Chris Hogan at the Jets, and Tyreek Hill face the Pittsburgh Steelers. Make sure to tweet us at BobbyFantasyPro and at Mike Tagliere NFL to let us know whose team you think is going to win. And Tags, I'm really glad we did this because we're gearing up for the biggest week ever on draft. They're launching multiplayer draft tournaments with a huge redeposit bonus. For those of you who don't know, the multiplayer tourneys are a total game changer. I did this during the baseball season with draft.com/pros. It's the most fun I've ever had with DFS. I'm not just saying that. $10 entry, $35,000 prize pool, and it's a 4-round tournament. So you're in an 8-team league in the first week, and if you win, you advance. Every winner in week 1 wins cash, and if you win 4 straight weeks, you get $5,000. I'm super pumped about this.
Wow. $5,000. That's nice.
You just got to win 4 straight weeks, man. $5,000. It's good.
How about you just win it and you share it with me? Can we do that? Can we make that deal?
I think that's cool, man. And if you win it, you share it with me?
Absolutely.
So you can get a free entry into this contest, the inaugural, if you deposit $100. This is for new and old users. Just deposit $100 and you'll automatically get a free $10 entry ticket that you can use in the inaugural. Please use promo code draft.com/pros. That's PROS. And when you deposit, you'll get free money back up to $100 for your deposit and notifications every time Tags and I do one of these drafts like we just did. That way you can compete against us. Again, that's draft.com/pros, PROS. And our guest today is Doug Norrie from DFSR.com. Doug handles all the projections over there and is just a math whiz. So I always look forward to chatting with him, picking your brain, Doug. Thanks for coming on.
You're the first person to call me a math whiz, so I'll take that. I'm going to actually probably clip that audio and then maybe put it in some kind of like in my bio or something. Because I think I don't know if it's necessarily true, but if you said it and when things get said, they're true. So thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So guys, we're doing this really cool DraftKings contest for our listeners this week. You can't lose anything. It's just a $3 entry fee and everyone gets their money back. You can actually win a lifetime Fantasy Pros subscription, tons of cash prizes. If this is your first time playing, you get a free entry plus the guaranteed cash prize. If you haven't tried DraftKings yet, I think this is the perfect opportunity to give it a try because there's no risk. You can't really lose. Tags, I'm really excited to whoop you in this contest too.
Well, going back to our draft contest that we had last week, I looked at that today and I saw that you finished 3rd, I finished 4th. So I did lose to Bobby in something. That's going to happen every now and then. I don't see it happening again. I'll just say that. I feel pretty confident about my DFS stuff this week. I feel like there's a lot of good values out there that we're going to talk about in the show today. But yeah, no, I mean, how often do you get to play? And people have asked me, they're like, okay, Mike, so if I enter $3 in this contest, so what do I get a $3 entry next week if I don't win? Like, how does that work? And I'm like, no, you literally get your $3 back. It's a can't lose situation. Like, there's really no reason for you not to play. So check it out. We've tweeted out the link. I'm sure on our site we have everything there, but check it out. Bobby, do you have the link for it?
So the link for this is fantasypros.com/DraftKings. It's really easy. You can get a lifetime Fantasy Pro subscription, lots of cash prizes too, and it's going to be a lot of fun. You can see how you do against Tags and I, and we're going to be in there. Again, that's fantasypros.com/DraftKings. And if you don't enter this, I guess you just don't like money because it's free.
It's free. There's really no reason not to.
All right, guys, so let's start at quarterback. And this week, it seems like the week of Tom Brady. He gets the Jets. I know he missed practice. We talked about this last show with Andy Behrens from yahoo.com, and it's not a big deal. He's 40 years old, so they're just giving him a break. But we project him for 24.5 points. Big old spread, so the game script's not perfect, but he's the best cash game play in my opinion. Is that who you have, Doug?
It's actually the spread that's kind of has me off him a little bit, and that's really the only reason. I for my cash games, and I've said this before in this podcast and then ours as well, is that I really try to trend as much as possible toward quarterbacks who can run. So I that's the only reason I'm off Brady a little bit. I see guys a little bit cheaper that I think we also have Brady as the highest projected guy, 24.35 on DraftKings, but I think there's guys a little bit cheaper that aren't far enough away. So I don't think it's going to be Brady just for those reasons for me.
Yeah, I don't like Brady as a cash game play. The Jets have actually played a lot better than I think people expected them to. And I mentioned on the show yesterday that Tom Brady playing against the Jets over the last 4 years in New York, And again, this is not a good Jets team. They haven't been a good Jets team. In New York, he's averaged just 231 yards per game, 1.0 touchdowns. Like, that's it, just one touchdown. So he's thrown 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games in New York, and he's thrown 3 interceptions in those games. Much better numbers at home against them. It's a divisional game. Those are typically closer than people think. So I would much rather fade Tom Brady than I would play him this week. I think my highest projected quarterback would be Drew Brees.
I think there's so much turnover, from season to season that we can't really go back and say, well, this is how he's done against the Jets. And you say the Jets have played well lately.
Phillip Rivers, we've done it with. Phillip Rivers, we do it against the Chiefs every time. I'm like, don't play Phillip Rivers against the Chiefs, and it pans out every single time. It's just the divisional games. These teams know each other so well, and the games mean so much. That I
also going to Arrowhead. They play twice half their games in Arrowhead when they play those games, and that's a really tough place to play. Also, you said the Jets have played well lately. They played the Browns, Jaguars coming off London, Miami, which has Jay Cutler, and the Bills. So I'm not super impressed by the Jets. I'm still picking on them. I mean, there are cheaper plays that I like, and I'm interested to get into those, but we can all agree, like, it's Tom Brady over Aaron Rodgers, right? If you're picking one of these two expensive guys, it's Tom Brady this week.
I'm not going to play either one in DFS, like, to be honest with you.
I would take Rodgers just because he's cheaper. Like that would be, he's on DraftKings, he's $1,000 cheaper. And I think like that would be the coin flip. If I was flipping a coin between them, that would be the tiebreaker, right? Like
better game script too.
It's only a tiebreaker. And,
3-point favorites. But they're going to Minnesota, and Minnesota has a really good pass defense. So there's no way I'd use them in cash games. In GPP, I'm going to get shares of both of them because you never know when one of them's going to get 30, 35 points.
Yeah, I'd much rather take the discount. Doug, how do you feel about Brees this week? Like, he's my favorite quarterback. He's the one I'll own. I think it's going to be somewhat of a contrarian play because people are either going to pay up like Bobby's doing for either for Tom Brady, or they're going to go down to like Deshaun Watson, who's a little bit cheaper than Brees. But I think Brees is in a fantastic spot coming off a bye. Michael Fabiano tweeted out something saying the last 6 games that Drew Brees has come off a bye at home, he's averaged 30.6 fantasy points per game. Like, it's some ridiculous number. And going against Detroit, who just lost Haloti Ngata, who is going to be on, he was placed on the IR. Obviously, that affects the run game, but this is a team that's had 2 weeks essentially to prepare for this game. They're coming off a game where they allowed Cam Newton to throw for 355 yards, 3 touchdowns. There's nothing that scares me about Detroit. I'm loving Drew Brees, and I'd play him over both Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, even if they were all the same price.
Yeah, I'm not. Oh, you love the total, and I actually love that Snead's going to be back here taking over for the Coleman role in the offense. So that's just a better pass catching option for him. I love that they've actually jettisoned Peterson as well. Like for Brees, I think all those things line up. Again, he doesn't fit the profile of the guy I like, and so that's the only reason for cash game purposes. Like, it's the only reason that I'm just sort of off a couple of these guys. I mean, we have him as the 5th highest projected quarterback. So it's not like we're low on him, I don't think, by any means. I would probably still take Rodgers over him. I do like the narrative piece. There's just, the thing is this week, there's just so many teams that have huge implied totals. Like on certain weeks, a 27 or so implied total, which is what the Saints have now, would be the highest of the week. Right now, it's like 3rd or 4th, right? So it's like,
even Houston's got 29.
Right, exactly. That's why I like Watson from that game personally. But it's just one of these weeks where I think it's going to be actually really hard to make lineups you don't like. And I actually don't often like, those are weeks that scare me a little bit, because when you have weeks like this where so many teams are in great spots, every single position, really you can pick 5 or 6 guys that you feel pretty comfortable with. Those are the weeks that scare me a little bit, because you don't need to do a ton of work to make a good lineup. Anyway, so that's I'm kind of diverted off of the Brees question. That's the only reason I'm low on him a little bit. And again, he just doesn't fit the mold of a cash game quarterback that I'm usually looking for.
Can you trust Watson in cash games, though? I mean, I understand you like the rushing quarterbacks and everything, but his last 2 games, he has 5 touchdowns. That's not going to keep up. 67, 41, 24, 31 rushing yards. That's pretty good, but I'm just not so sure.
The thing about, I agree that I'm typically also very gun shy about rookies, because there's ways that you can go way overboard on performance. Like that's happened with Kareem Hunt, I think, to some degree. And I think there's ways to go way overboard on just what implied performance is going to be on a guy from week to week when we have a small sample size. The thing with Watson is, the reason I don't mind, one, the Cleveland defense, I don't mind that their implied total, and he just has almost every game script as opposed to some of the other quarterbacks mentioned above, right? Almost every piece of the game script goes in his favor for them to put up points because he hits the ground so much, because he has the receivers at his disposal, and because they've just been willing to use them. And losing J.J. Watt, it's hard to imagine. The Houston defense has just gotten worse too, so it's hard to imagine like huge blowout potential. That's the reason I like him. It's more, and it's really I gotta default to the running. The running is such a huge thing. Like the 31, 24, 41, 67 in the games that he's basically started. That is for him that's like a half to 75% to a full touchdown that you're making up over guys like Breeze and Brady, right? That are not going to do that. That need to get that through the air. It just makes a huge difference on their floor for a quarterback. So I think there's just game script wise for Watson, he's independent of the way of how those other guys can run bad. If, for instance, they just run in a touchdown. So that's where kind of I am more with Watson.
Here's my beef against Watson. He hasn't thrown more than 34 passes in a game. They're just not throwing the ball with him that much. His past 3 games, he went up against bottom 6 pass defenses. I know he's going to get one again. I know the bye's coming up, but there's just other options I like better. Like, on normal weeks, I'd probably say, man, Watson is a great play. Like, this is probably my play, but there's just players I like more than Watson this week. I like Kirk Cousins at San Francisco. If I'm spending down, I love Carson Palmer, Phillip Rivers. They both have good matchups as well. What do you think about these guys? Do either of them stand out to you?
Well, I mean, I want to say that Watson is a really safe quarterback, and maybe I should have specified when I talked about Breeze and the fact that I think he's my favorite play on the board. I don't think you need to pay up for Breeze in cash. I think you can go to Watson. I think Watson is as safe as they come. As Doug was saying, his floor with his rushing totals is through the roof. Okay, that's like almost like another touchdown a game is what he's averaging on the ground. And on top of that, the Browns defense, they have allowed it's 25 of the last 31 games now where they've allowed multiple passing touchdowns to quarterbacks. And like you look at the competition they played this year: Josh McCown, Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco, and Ben Roethlisberger. None of those quarterbacks have been playing elite football, and not a single quarterback has finished outside the top 16 in any given week. So Deshaun Watson is a fantastic cash game play. I don't think you need to go down this week. I think you could actually spend up a quarterback. I think it's unnecessary to go down to like someone like Kevin Hogan, who's like 4,600 on DraftKings, and it's tempting. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I played Brian Hoyer in cash last week, so you don't have to tell me about like understanding risk associated with it, but I just don't think that this is a week where you need to do that on DraftKings. I think they've made pricing, especially with the running backs, to the point where you can fit one of the higher priced quarterbacks. So again, I just don't think that you need to go down to that price. And I do think Deshaun Watson is really, really safe.
Doug, are you considering any of those guys for cash games? Cousins, Palmer, Rivers?
Cousins I wrote up this week for our own cash picks. He's just I do see a bounce back coming off the bye for him. Another week to work with those receivers feels like it's a good spot. They're going to be without Rob Kelly. It seems like they'll probably want to pass a little bit more. He's just fits that mold of another quarterback. Like I would rather so for instance between him and Breeze, I think I'd rather with the game totals somewhere around the same. I think I'd go a little bit cheaper on Cousins just because I see their floors is basically the same. They profiled to me as basically the same. I mean, Breeze I think is a better quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but with the price savings and the potential scoring of that group, I probably would go. Cousins is a guy I don't mind for cash. I like Watson more. I actually don't mind Alex Smith as much, which seems crazy. Alex Smith 80%, close to an 80% completion percentage this year. He runs a little bit too. I think it's like 78% completion percentage, which is completely crazy. It's going to regress. There's no way you can keep that up really for an entire season. Although the routes they run with him are typically pretty safe, and the fact that he's been throwing down the field a little bit is encouraging. So
can I play devil's advocate on Cousins this week though? I want to mention that I think it's important that we say that Kyle Shanahan obviously used to coach Kirk Cousins. Pierre Garçon used to catch passes from Kirk Cousins, and it's like this wild card that these two know his weaknesses extremely well. Josh Doxson is someone who hasn't played 100%. Jamison Crowder, I think he's playing through injuries. He's not going to have a run game because Samaje Perine has looked like garbage, and Rob Kelly's missing this game. So what I'm saying is like, and I wasn't opposed to Perine before the season, but he's looked like trash in his opportunities. He's looked completely like bad. But that's my concern. I don't know if the 49ers have the talent to combat, what they know that Kirk Cousins' weaknesses are. I just worry about that, eventually the lack of options that he has to throw to is going to affect him. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins is a bad play. I wanted to play devil's advocate and say that, that obviously Shanahan, that's why people have tied the strings to Shanahan getting him after the season, right? Is because people are saying Shanahan knows what he wants and Kirk Cousins fits his system and this and that. So that's just the tie.
Two other things. He's coming off the bye, but it is an 11.5 spread, so that's pretty big. Game script doesn't set up especially well. There's a lot of plays I like quite a bit, but none that I absolutely love. So I might come off Brady and change my mind. I like Cousins a lot. But for me, Carson Palmer is, it's a great play, I think. He's just throwing the ball so much. Tampa stops the run, so they're not going to run at all. He's on pace to break the single season record for pass attempts. So I think it's a safe play down there. 7,100 on FanDuel, guys.
Nobody's mentioned Matt Ryan. Why has nobody mentioned Matt Ryan?
He hasn't thrown enough this year. They haven't needed to throw a ton. There's another one off the bye. They haven't taken to the air a lot. They've had some weird matchups. So I think that, could be a little bit of noise in there. I don't mind them. They just seem a little bit more committed to the running game this season than last. They've also had some weird injuries in the wide receiver core at times. So I don't know. That's the only thing I'm off of Matt Ryan. Some just the overall, like guys like, so there's teams this year that have had to throw a ton by necessity, right? And these are, the Arizonas of the world, the Giants have had to do it a ton. Even like Tom Brady's had to throw more because they haven't been able to run the ball as much and the defense has been garbage. And Atlanta just hasn't been one of those teams. The teams with a more balanced attack just haven't had to do it. I think that's the reason projection system like ours are a little bit lower on him, just because when you're not projected to throw the ball a lot, I mean, that's like the easy math, right? If you're not projected to throw the ball a lot, like where are the points going to come from? I think that's it. And we just have some of these teams that are just so heavy on the pass, just because they don't really have any other options, mostly because their run games stink.
Yeah, and again, 12.5 spread.
Right, and I was tying it to like Miami's defense and the fact that like what are their strengths and weaknesses. I think that their strength is against the run, whereas their secondary is just weak. They don't have an answer for Julio Jones and Mohamed Sanu being out. Maybe I should just get more exposure to Julio than I would Matt Ryan. And necessarily, I don't think I need to necessarily stack them. So maybe I'll just go with Julio rather than tying my stock to Matt Ryan. So I like the call there, talking me down a little bit off Matt Ryan.
I love Matt Ryan for GPP, but I'm looking at him for cash. Cleveland is worse against the pass than Miami. Deshaun Watson has at least 17 points in every game. That's Matt Ryan's ceiling so far this season. Plus, Atlanta's wide receiver core is just so banged up that I'm not sure it's as much of an advantage as it usually is.
It's fair. I mean, it's a fair argument. But like I said, I can understand what the game script concerns and the fact that the Dolphins haven't been able to score points. And this could be a game where they just don't need to necessarily throw a whole lot. So that's why we talk it out on these shows. So yeah, I think my favorite two plays are Breeze and Deshaun Watson.
What about GPP plays, Doug? Do you have one or two that you're fond of that we haven't talked about quite yet?
I don't mind. It's crazy. I actually don't mind going back to Carson Palmer. No one's going to want to play him because he's looked kind of washed. But this team, again, they're just going to need to throw. The Peterson thing makes no difference for me at all, one way or the other. And this team, they cannot run the ball at all. They're not going to be able to. They're going to play down for most of the rest of the season. And they've shown that they can throw 50 times a game or somewhere ranging up toward that number. And when you're going to get that kind of volume, even when you stink, you can hit a huge upside. Palmer stinks. So it's really not the case for Palmer. It's the case for, he does have wide receivers at his disposal. He has running backs that can catch the ball too. Like Ellington's caught a ton of balls this year. So he has safety outlets. And the fact that the volume is going to be there at 6,100 on DraftKings, that strikes me as a GPP play. I would not do it in cash. I did do it in cash last week. It was such a huge, it did not work out. But I think from that perspective, if you're just looking for guys that are going to throw the ball a lot, Palmer has multiple touchdown upside playing from behind. Again, it's not safe, but from GPP, I can see it happen.
Tags, you have anyone for us?
No. I mean, I wanted to mention Ben Roethlisberger just because, I think that they match up very interesting against the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a heavy man coverage team, and it's going to be difficult for them to cover the wide receivers for the Steelers. And the fact that Ben Roethlisberger, again, it was at home last year, but a defense that was playing a lot better than they are this year with Eric Berry. He threw for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns against last year. And Marcus Peters has been playing like garbage. So, I mean, it's really interesting. And, I mean, he's only 5,700 on DraftKings. Nobody's going to want to play him. It is an Arrowhead, so there's plenty of risk associated with it, which is why I obviously wouldn't play him in cash. But I think he's a very interesting tournament play.
I really like that call with Roethlisberger because really when you want to grab guys is off of just their bottom, for their career ever weeks, which clearly Big Ben had last week. The 5 interceptions, I would say like 2 of them were for real. The other 3 were kind of fluky. And so like it just wasn't a real 5 interception game. It was more like a 1.5 to 2 interception game that turned into 5. And then the game got completely out of hand by having them both be pick sixes. Like he was not actually looking too bad. Like Antonio Brown was crushing the Ramsey and company. Like, and then he just had, a wide receiver slip, a tip ball, one really bad interception, and then a downfield sort of heave. Roethlisberger, I agree with that completely. Like he strikes me as a guy who no one is going to play and has, arguably the 2 best weapons in the NFL on his team. Like the two best combination weapons. Like if you were to add up the 2 best guys from a team in Bell and Brown, really no other team has 2 top tier guys like that. So now I love that Roethlisberger call just because you're going to get him at like 5% ownership or something like that. No one's going to play him, especially too. He comes out after the game and kind of admits that he might be done, which was such a weird thing to say. But I think that's a really good call.
They made fun of me on Monday for saying that I thought Big Ben didn't actually play that bad, and I'm glad to hear you say that. I big time agree with you. I watched the whole game, and Jacksonville just made plays, man. A couple tip balls.
He didn't play bad. It's weird. It's like weird to show a 5 interception game and say you didn't play bad. I just really. I was all over Antonio Brown last week. I think I would go back there again when we talk about wide receivers. But no, I think Roethlisberger bounced back. No one's going to play him and has big upside. I like this call a lot.
There's 2 guys we haven't talked about yet that I think have pretty substantial upside, and it's going to make you both puke. But Case Keenum has had some big games in his career.
No, stop. Sir, no, don't. No, just end your take there. Don't play Case Keenum.
No, you're wrong, Tags. Case Keenum has been a top 5 quarterback 15% of the times he has started in the NFL. He's going to be owned in 1% of lineups. I mean, he had 28 points earlier in the season, and we're looking at him for super cheap. There is a real chance he's in the top lineup this week against Green Bay. There's a real chance. And Blake Bortles, same kind of thing. Blake Bortles is horrible. He had 95 yards last week. They barely let him throw it all. But Blake Bortles has had big games before. We've seen San Francisco just carve up this Rams defense. There's a real chance Blake Bortles is a top 5 quarterback this week. And if he is and nobody owns him, you could be in the cash. He's $7,000. Nobody's going to own him. But there's a real chance he compiles 25 plus points.
You're better than this, Bobby. Let's talk about some running backs.
Well, no. Tag, you're wrong here, man. Like, Blake Bortles and Case Keenum, there is a 5% chance that one of them has a big game. Nobody's going to own them.
If you make 100,
I am not putting my reputation on the line saying Blake Bortles is going to have a good week. There's a very low chance it happens. But there's a chance it happens. And if it happens and you've got him in your lineup, you win, man.
But that's just like throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks.
You have to throw stuff at the wall. You have to be contrarian in GPP.
Well, I could make something twisted for every quarterback. I could say Trubisky with his rushing ability that he could run for 90 yards and a touchdown. It's probably not going to happen.
But it happens more often with players like Blake Bortles and Case Keenum who have had quite a bit of big games in their career.
I'm going to disagree on this one.
I'm not saying you're wrong. It is ugly, but these kind of plays are what win you $1 million, man.
Doug, could you tell him that he's wrong?
I can't do Blake Bortles. I can't make a case for him. So like, I'm just not going to, I usually try to in any situation, like try to make a case for somebody because I do agree. I agree with the part where like you can make a case.
I mean, you couldn't have made a case for Blake Bortles in week 3 either when he put up 27 points and won someone $1 million.
It's not that there's not a case. I just like, I don't know if I want to be the one to do it. Where the Keenum part is interesting. Keenum has receivers. Like Keenum has Diggs and Thielen. And so, and Rudolph as well. So the fact that he has weapons and McKinnon probably getting a majority of the carries out of the backfield now as a good pass catching running back, that I would make the case more for Keenum than Bortles, I guess. Let me put it that way. So if I was to pick between the two, I would definitely say Keenum because he has the guys at his disposal, and the Jags they've shown that they're just willing to run Leonard Fournette into the ground, and that's what I do think caps his upside a little bit. Like they're going to run Fournette, they run Fournette even when they're losing. So that is like that's my case against Bortles. But the Keenum one, I can see the merit in it because he's shown that he can heavily target guys like Diggs, who I think is supposed to play, and Thielen, having those guys in the field would make me feel a little bit better about him.
I agree that the plays suck, and I'm sorry I'm going on a rant here, but if you look at the top GPP lineups all season, there's been contrarian plays galore. I mean, I remember Jared Goff in week 1. You made fun of me about that one too, Tags. That one worked out pretty well. Someone won $1 million on that.
Head-to-heads, Bobby. Let's play. I'm just messing with you, dude. Let's talk about some running backs.
Yeah, let's go running backs. Okay, so right here, Kareem Hunt, Le'Veon Bell, Leonard Fournette, they're in the top tier here for me, and none of them really stand out in my opinion. Who's the standout guy to you, Doug?
This is gonna be an interesting week, and one of the things I was mentioning about just where some of these games are going is I think that One thing that scares me a little bit from a cash game perspective is that you can make a very strong case for about 6 running backs this week. And the fact that you can really only play, let's say 2 of them, if you didn't play one in your flex, means that it's going to be hard to go wrong on running backs. So that from a cash game perspective, I don't always love when that lines up that way, because even just your average Joe can make a lineup with multiple running backs. They feel pretty good. Of the top group, I would probably trend toward, of those guys, I would trend toward Hunt. You said Bell, Hunt, and who's the third one you said?
Fournette.
Oh, Fournette.
Against the Rams.
Yeah, no, I would probably take Hunt of that group, with the caveat that I think Bell probably has more upside. So I think Hunt strikes me as a wee bit safer here, just because they're the favorites. But I do think Bell, just the way they've been using him, almost no matter how the game script is going, I think he has a little bit more upside. The problem with Bell is just very expensive. And I think that's the reason I probably would not play him and go toward Hunt. There's a $1,400 difference between them on DraftKings. So for those 2 reasons, I would, of that group, I would trend toward Hunt, though there's a real strong case to be made the way they're using Fournette as well.
You know, on FanDuel, Hunt's actually more expensive. I like Bell for DraftKings because he's going to get so many receptions, but yeah, that price is just too extravagant.
One thing, actually, you make a good point there with the FanDuel pricing. If you're not like us and you don't have, systems at your disposal that you have, back end analytics to kind of generate where you're going to get projections from and sort of coming up with a number. One really simple way to do that from, just a very nuts and bolts thing is just compare FanDuel and DraftKings pricing. And if you find inconsistencies on one to the other and just decide, if Hunt's more expensive than Bell and $1,400 less on DraftKings, one of those sites made a mistake. And if you can pick out those mistakes sort of like as a way to just pick out value, that is a really easy way to do it, I think. So I think if you're just like a standard listener that doesn't like use projections, I think just seeing the difference between the 2 sites and saying, well, one site saw them as the same and the other one seems a $1,400 difference, I'll just take the savings on the one, and that's where I can get my value.
Tags, who's your top running back? Does maybe Gurley belong in this tier too?
I was about to say, I like Hunt as probably my top running back, but I think Gurley belongs in this conversation. And I wasn't on Gurley last week. I know a lot of people were, but I think this week against Jacksonville, I don't think that the Rams make the same mistake twice in a row. And this is a mistake that the Steelers did last week, not giving the ball to Le'Veon Bell enough. Going back before the game against the Steelers, they allowed 2 top 8 running backs against the Jets. Bilal Powell and both Elijah McGuire both finished as top 8 running backs. You go the week before that against the Ravens, they allowed 123 yards on 23 carries to the combination of Alex Collins, Buck Allen, and Terrence West. And then even the week before that, the Titans have really struggled to get their ground game going this year. They averaged 5.1 yards per carry against the Jaguars. If there's one area that this team struggles, it's against the run. And if the Rams want to get back on track, I think Todd Gurley gets the ball a lot. The weird thing that I don't really understand what happened last week, and maybe you guys have some insight on this, but why did they not use him in the passing game more often? Like, what did he catch? 2 passes for 7 yards? Like, Todd Gurley had been crushing through the air. Like, that was why he was such a good play. So that's a little concerning, but at the same time, it was also the first week they got kind of like manhandled and lost the game because it was just bad play calling. So I think that they go back to Todd Gurley, and I think that he definitely belongs in this conversation. He's also the cheapest.
Oh, I would have added him as the top. He was the reason I didn't mention him out of that 3 is that I was just having to choose between that 3 didn't do it. He's my top cash game play this week because of the price. I think that he was very close. So last week, when you look at his performance, he had an 8-point fantasy swing on the first drive of the game when he reaches the ball out over the goal line, and it gets knocked away by Thomas. And that turns from 6. It's an inch from being 6 points, and instead is -2. He has he's basically an 8-point fantasy swing on that one play that also ended up kind of scripting some of the game away from him because they would have started with the lead. And I think, not to say how you can see how the rest of the game is going to play out, but then they went from that to basically being down after the drive on Seattle's part. So I think that it was one of these things where it was so close to being a huge game from him, and it just and this is where football's variance comes in, is that those little things make it's like the equivalent of shooting like a 20-pointer in basketball. If you ran bad from 20 pointers one night, you would feel like some of the same way, except that doesn't exist in basketball, but it does exist in football. And when you look at that, it was just so close to being just add 8 points to his and the line right there, and there's almost no way he's priced in the same category, I wouldn't think. So no, I think Gurley is the guy that I'm going to lean on for cash games too. I totally agree with you.
Especially in DraftKings, he's getting so many receptions this year. Like you said, Tags, they didn't throw him the ball last week, and I have no idea why. Sometimes NFL teams just don't do the right thing, like when they targeted Tyler Higbee and Robert Woods more than like anybody else. It just doesn't make sense sometimes, but it usually does make sense. He's going to get some receptions against Jacksonville. He's going to get 20 plus rushes, and he'll probably get over 100 yards and a few touchdowns.
Yeah, I think one player to keep an eye on this week, I'll ask you guys, because like this seems like a guy I keep going back to the well. And last week I got people telling me, oh, props in the call, Mike. And I felt disappointed. Like I was like, no, don't say it was a good call. Marshawn Lynch disappointed last week. He should have had a much better week. I know he scored a touchdown and all, but I want to go back this week against the Chargers. The Chargers this year are awful. I don't know if you guys have realized how many rushing yards they've allowed. They're allowing over 160 yards per game to running backs. The next closest team, I think, is in like the 130s. Like it's not even close. They've allowed 3 touchdowns. This is a game where I don't think we have to worry about game script concern for him, especially if Derek Carr comes back. Derek Carr is another guy that's not throwing the ball more than 35 times per game. I just feel like Marshawn Lynch is just underpriced. Like I know he's 5,000 on DraftKings. He doesn't catch passes very much, but on FanDuel, I mean, I think he's a better play on FanDuel just because I think a touchdown is locked in. But am I off my rocker to go back to Marshawn Lynch again?
I don't think so. I mean, he's cheaper than Chris Thompson, Latavius Murray, Bilal Powell, all these guys, and he's going against the worst run defense in football.
Right.
I'm not on that play as much, I don't think. Well, definitely, really on DraftKings, no, because the PPR piece really makes a huge difference. And if he's really projected for like a target and a half per game, something like that, I think that he's pretty severely capped on DraftKings in terms of where he can get. For a leverage play on touchdowns, if you think he's a multiple touchdown guy, and he is, I mean, Orleans Darkwa ran in a freaking touchdown against the Chargers. So like,
right.
Like anybody can do it, I would say. But it's a GPP play because you just absolutely have to have the touchdowns, right? Like that's what you need. Where these other guys, and I think there are some other guys in this cheaper range from a volume perspective, probably just give you a higher floor. Guys like Lynch and guys like, LeGarrette Blount sort of fits this description as well. They can have monster weeks because of the goal line usage. You just have to get there with it. And that's where the variance is going to come in, because you're going to be looking at, 6 to 12 point kind of deviations off their mean just because of the touchdown.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some players in that middle range, like some running backs. Like I'm torn on who to like between like Amir Abdullah at 4,900 is dirt cheap on DraftKings. I love that play in New Orleans. He's been getting 15 plus touches. I think he's averaging 16 touches a week right now.
Love it too.
Alvin Kamara's 4,500. Mark Ingram's 4,400. This is like the tier that I'm so torn on, and I can't decide between these 3 guys.
I'm not playing any of them for cash games. For GPP, all 3 of those are great plays.
I'd play Ingram for cash. I think Ingram's going to see, he was double-digit carries in games that kind of scripted okay for him. Losing Adrian Peterson makes a difference for him because I actually think that he picks up more of the Peterson. I mean, Peterson had something like 6.5 to 7 carries per game when he was with the Saints. I think most of those sets are more Ingram sets than Kamara sets. So if he were to trend... Even if he were to get, honestly, even if they split them, let's say they just split the carries right down the middle. Now you're looking more at like a 14 to 15 carry game for Ingram, and he also catches balls out of the backfield. I think people will be more on Kamara because it's like it's more of a narrative piece that people just think that he's going to get the carries. But Ingram's just been with his team. They've shown the willingness to run the ball with him at times in the right games. I think 18 to 19 touches for him is completely reasonable. And whereas I don't think 18 to 19 touches is reasonable for Kamara. And from that point, 4,400, Ingram's kind of a lock for me for cash games on DraftKings, frankly. I just think that the price and how they planned, I could be wrong. Like, look, if Kamara starts the game and he runs the first like 3 sets, then I'm going to feel real bad about that call. But I just really don't think that's the case. I don't think they're willing to turn the team over to him. And I think Ingram's going to be basically a DraftKings lock for me.
I know Jay Ajayi hasn't gotten the end zone yet, but he's running the ball a ton. Atlanta hasn't been very good against the run. Do you think that maybe he would be a good play this week?
I think it's game script concerns,
Yeah.
like really big game script. Like if you go through and look at Jay Ajayi in games Miami loses, he averages single-digit fantasy points. Like I'm not kidding, it's really bad. Like that, it's just been the story with Jay Ajayi. If it's not a positive game script, and I really don't see any way that this game goes positive game script, I actually think that the Falcons defense is a great play at home. That's the thing with me is like Ajayi, his snaps did go back to somewhat normal last week, which is a positive sign, right? But at the same time, this offensive line sucks. Jay Cutler is not getting anything done, and it's a negative game script. That they're on the road, an underdog, like a massive underdog. I just feel like everything is playing against him. Like you're looking for a player to check all the boxes. He like unchecks all the boxes.
Yeah, I think I probably pretty much agree with that take on Ajayi. I mean, it's unless they switch quarterbacks or or they just have some other plan.
He could score 2 touchdowns, though. I mean, I won't disagree.
Yeah, for GPP, he's solid. But yeah, cash games, I'm not touching him because of the game script.
It could be it could be one of those garbage. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown yet. So I'm not, this is actually one that I'm not completely saying that it's like off your rocker, like the Blake Bortles take, because I do think that it could be a point where the Falcons are up 3 touchdowns and Jay Ajayi, he steals 2 touchdowns. Go back to last year. You remember Carlos Hyde against the Seahawks? They were getting their butts kicked. And in the fourth quarter, Carlos Hyde scored 2 touchdowns. I think that could happen with Jay Ajayi because this offense literally needs something, some sort of confidence to go off of because they look awful. But again, in cash, no. GPP, I mean, maybe some exposure. I just don't think you would go overboard.
We haven't even mentioned 2 of my favorite players this week. It's Jerick McKinnon against the Packers. He is super cheap, and we saw he can be electric. We saw what he did last week. I think he won himself this job. And then CJ Anderson. No one's ever talking about CJ Anderson, but the Giants can't tackle to save their lives. Again, this is a great game script. -13. They're the biggest favorites on the week. CJ Anderson, if you look at his schedule so far this year, 20 rushes, 25 rushes, 20 rushes. He's coming off the bye. I love CJ this week. He's in my cash games.
He's my favorite. Yeah.
Oh, I like CJ Anderson, but he's not on the main slate though.
Oh, he's not on the main slate. He's not on the main slate for DraftKings, but on the main slate for FanDuel. I hate that DraftKings did this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, Tex.
Yeah. Yeah, I play all DraftKings pretty much. I play like literally very little FanDuel. I'm more of a DraftKings guy. So I blocked out that game, but I love the Colin CJ Anderson. The game script that game is going to be so ugly. I don't know what the NFL is going to do about this because the Giants are going to go to 0-6, and then they play the Seahawks next week. Now they're playing them without Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, who's now suspended
for leaving the game in the middle of the game. Oh man,
it is so.
Is there
nuts.
any chance they trade Manning?
It's a bad situation.
They should bench him. They should sit him and just not get him hurt. Is what I would do. I'm being kind of serious. There's no reason to play these guys. They're basically the practice squad at this point. The Giants. I think Anderson for FanDuel for me is a phenomenal play, and actually really a reason to play that primetime slate as well on DraftKings because he checks every single box from a usage standpoint. Huge favorite. Giants defense was supposed to be good. They completely stink. The team stinks. Denver defense is probably going to be a pretty popular play on FanDuel. I know I love Anderson. And actually, it's one of those things where DFS is really hard sometimes to take your own personal results out of or what a player has done for you. So I played CJ Anderson one time this year, and it was against Buffalo in all my cash games, and he carried the ball 8 times that game, and he's been 20 plus every time. I think being willing to wipe those things out of your memory and just go back to sort of the math that makes sense. Anderson is cheaper than every guy that we mentioned in that top tier, and has just as much upside to me as any of those guys.
So what do you think about McKinnon, maybe Elijah McGuire? Are there any other plays you like here, Doug?
McKinnon has had the ability to start in the past and has shown he's just not very good at running between the tackles. And we have a pretty solid track record of that from last year when they handed the reins to him, and he averaged, under 4 yards a carry. He's a great change of pace guy, and we showed last week when they had sort of game planned a little bit for the Latavius Murray kind of thing, and he comes in and catches some balls, and the game was a little bit more wide open. I think he's fine from that standpoint. I'm just worried because we just seen what happens when they just give him the ball 17 times a game. He's just not a very good between the tackles runner. So he's small, and he's meant
their offensive line's been hurt every time he's got a chance too, and now it's healthy.
I know I just don't think it just doesn't do it for me. For instance, you said P. Ryan. I actually love him this week. I know he's not very, and the problem is he's not very good. So that's always a problem when from a running back standpoint. But that's it, and they're going to run him they've done it before. He's had 2 games with up to 20 carries. If you're going to project for 20 carries and even a sniff part of the passing game at his price is really on both sites. It is. I rarely, especially on FanDuel, want to delve into this range of running back because it almost is always a trap. Like just nearly 100% of the time it's a trap with these things because teams just aren't willing to handle the full load. But Chris Thompson's just not going to supplant the run carries, and they're such a huge favorite against San Francisco that it's one of those times where I am willing to go. It's sort of like D'Angelo Williams last year, and I'm not comparing them, but when he spelled Le'Veon Bell and he was coming in very cheap, this is the same kind of scenario for me. I think that he kind of checks those boxes. He kind of checks those boxes, and I'm willing to do it. And again, I'm caveated by saying it is almost always a trap. I think you can get away with it this week.
So you're talking about cash games or GPP for P. Ryan?
Cash. Yeah. I think that if it had been a scenario where this was his first week and we weren't sure. Like when a guy supplants another guy and the team comes out and says, oh, he's going to be our guy this week, and the coaches are usually lying about that, or they don't really know, and they have no incentive to tell the truth about what their plans are for running backs. And we've seen that time and time again, really from just about, Seattle's the king of this, right? Like, oh, this is our guy this week, and then they split carries, or that guy just plays a series and leaves, If that had been the case with the Redskins and it was new, I would not be as confident. But we have 2 games with him where he has close to 20 carries, and that just means that he's their guy. So that, and again, he's not very good, but game script wise, huge favorite, and their ability, the way they've used him in the past has me okay with him for cash.
No, I like that, Colin P. Ryan. And one player I wanted to mention, just we don't have to talk about him, but I think Theo Riddick is a GPP play isn't like the worst thing in the world against the Saints. If the game script goes negative, he's going to be a guy that's like 0% owned. The only thing I wanted to mention though, Bobby, with McKinnon, I don't dislike the play necessarily, but I also think that the reward is not great enough for the risk, because he's going to be so heavily owned after what people just saw on a primetime game against a Bears defense that was missing 4 of their top 6 linebackers. So yeah, don't take too much from that game with McKinnon. He's a solid player overall, but at the same time, he's going to be so heavily owned.
Can I mention one more guy too, just before we go? Because, and this is the kind of the theme for the week, is that there's just so many running backs to play, and this is why it scares me, because I think everyone's made a pretty solid case. We're on 10 running backs at this point that you can make a really solid case for. I mean, you can also make that same kind of case for Devontae Freeman. He's in, and this is why I actually don't mind pivoting to Freeman in GPPs over guys like Fournette in the same price range. He also fits that at home, big favorite. They've been willing to use him a lot. He's got the lowest coefficient of variation of any running back in his tier this season, which means he's just been very, very steady thanks to the touchdown use. The other reason that Ryan's totals look a little bit lower is because they've used Freeman more in the red zone this year. I don't think when people are lining up guys like Gurley, Fournette, Hunt, and Bell in that top tier, just nobody is going to play Devontae Freeman, because you can make the case for the guys above him are stronger here. But I think that I would be willing to do it because he has touchdown equity upside. They've shown that they want to do that before, and he is steady in terms of how they use them. So that's a guy that I wouldn't mind pivoting to. And you're going to again have him on super low ownership, because when you're filling out your lineups and you're maybe doing it by hand, and you see a guy like Fournette for basically the same price, who's clicking Freeman? Nobody, right? So
and for whatever reason, he's dominated at home too. He's always been great in a dome. His touchdown numbers are shoulders above what they are on the road. So I dig that call, man.
So this week at wide receiver, it's not quite as exciting. Antonio Brown's got a nice matchup against Kansas City because, like you said, Peters is just horrible this year. Michael Thomas is up there. Jordy Nelson gets Minnesota. Mike Evans gets Patrick Peterson if Peterson is healthy. It's not super exciting. Is there one guy that stands out to you here, Doug?
Yeah, Brown, I really can't argue with him at this point. I played him in 100% of cash games last week against and basically with separation.
So expensive. That's my only concern.
It is, and that's why I don't mind playing some of those cheaper running backs, because this is what you get, right? So what I like to do is say, if this then that kind of scenario. If I pay down for running back, what am I getting in exchange at wide receiver? You're not getting the same savings lower at wide receiver that you are at running back. And that the reason I would be willing to play guys like, well, CJ Anderson doesn't fit the bill, but P. Ryan and Ingram and guys like this is because what you get to pay up for is Antonio Brown. And he's in such a class by himself in terms of target share that it's worth it. It's worth to pay the extra on him than to try to save at wide receiver, where you mentioned it too. It's just it's an unexciting group of players at the position this week. So I think he's the reason I'm willing to take maybe a small hit on safety at running back, because Brown, he's such a huge edge on targets over really anybody else that it just makes the safety piece on him is more than you're going to find really at anyone else in the position.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I think Bobby hit it on the head though. For me, is 9,300 is really expensive, and my concern is that last week with Roethlisberger, the game he had, is that he goes back to the drawing board and says, okay, maybe I can't target Antonio Brown 18 times a game. Maybe that's not the brightest thing to do. And it's not to say that Antonio Brown doesn't deserve a lot of targets, and he's going to get a lot. When you talk about 9,300, in order to hit value in a cash lineup, you're talking, you need him to score 22 plus points, and it's not to say that he's not going to do that. It's just that's literally the bare minimum that he can score in order to hit value. So going down for me, if you want to go down a little bit, like Julio Jones, solid play against Miami. I think with Mohamed Sanu out, I think that we're looking at extended targets for him, which is something that we don't get to guarantee very much with Julio. Again, it's worrisome that the fact that he had a hip injury going into the bye week, but maybe that bye week gave him a chance to heal up a little bit. I'm not saying that Julio Jones should be played in cash, but as a tournament play, I like Julio a lot. But Michael Thomas, I think, is my favorite cash game wide receiver if you want to pay up. 7,300. The Lions they don't have an answer. I know Darius Slay is considered a really good cornerback. I don't consider him to be one of I don't even think he's a top 15 cornerback in my book. Michael Thomas has played against some really, really good cornerbacks this year, and going into their bye week, he was sitting as the number 7 fantasy wide receiver. So he's overcome some tough matchups. They're moving him around the formation. Good luck, Quandre Diggs, when he matches up with you in the slot. It's just not going to happen. So, 7,300, he's a lot cheaper. Bobby mentioned it. There's a lot of bad matchups between Jordy Nelson, between Mike Evans. There's some other guys, but in cash, if I'm paying up, I think Michael Thomas is my play.
It's been consistent too, at least 5 receptions. He's got 80 plus yards in the past 3 games. It's pretty good.
I'm a little worried with Snead coming back because Snead has shown that he is a target guy, especially just kind of on under routes. That Breeze has been willing to kind of use him in that short and close territory, not short and close territory in terms of near the end zone, but just in short passing downs. Snead has been that guy, and if he's going to just take over that role, that's the only thing that has me. We have Thomas for the 3rd highest projected points on the main slate of any wide receiver, so really like the matchup. It's just when they add a guy that's proven to be taking target share in the past, that's my only little concern with Thomas, and it's still kind of close because of the price.
Yeah, the only concern there, so Snead, they haven't even said that he's going to be a starter. They're saying that they're going to ease him back in. That's all he's been saying, and that's what we heard up to the London game too. And now coming out of the bye week, it's weird that we're continuing to hear this. So that's the reason Snead, I tell people give it a week, don't trust him. I think Ted Ginn's actually a sneaky play at 3,600.
3,600, man. Yeah, that's a nice GPP play. I don't know if I trust him for cash, but that's an interesting one. I think you've got to love Hopkins this week against Cleveland. They're 11-point favorites, and Hopkins just gets so many targets. He's safe. Keenan Allen, I think, is safe too. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1, but they're going to throw quite a bit against Oakland. I think that he's a nice play, sitting there at 7,200 on FanDuel. Stephon Diggs against Green Bay, if he plays. I know he's got the questionable mark with the groin, but I think Stephon Diggs is the nice player in that range as well.
I love Keenan Allen. Allen had a bunch of red zone targets last week against the Giants and just couldn't convert them. And that was actually drawing way more Janoris Jenkins than I thought he was going to. So, it seemed like he was going to line up more in the slot, and just maybe they were going to move him around to avoid Jenkins. Jenkins did shadow cover him, and they still forced the ball to him in the red zone. He just couldn't convert. One basically was out of his hands, and then 2 other ones he just didn't have a chance on. But it's more of just the narrative piece of this is who Rivers wants to go to in these scenarios. And Allen's just such a huge target guy. The conversion rate has been a little troublesome. So, but he's also drawn. If you look at Allen's matchups, he's drawn some of the most difficult just cornerback matchups to start the season. He got Jenkins last week, and my thing's being slow to load here. Right, he got Jenkins. I know Marcus Peters hasn't been that great, but he did draw that KC coverage. He had Denver in week 1. Which is about as bad as you can get when it comes to drawing cornerbacks. So he's run a little bit bad in matchups, does not get that at all here against Oakland. It's kind of just the opposite scenario. So I love Allen for cash. I think that the fact that he's run bad on touchdowns is actually probably kept his price in check. He should one touchdown is low for how much they've targeted him in the red zone. So you get 1 or 2 more of those over the course of the season, and he's in the mid 8,000s. He's with the DeAndre Hopkins group and of priced wide receivers, and the fact that he's a little bit lower has me on him this week for sure.
I think you guys might be able to go down to Golden Tate and get the same performance. He's 1,100 cheaper. This is a tailor-made matchup for Golden Tate. And I know a lot of people aren't going to play him because he's been kind of crappy the last couple of weeks. But this matchup, Kenny Vaccaro has been coming down and covering slot wide receivers while Sterling Moore has been out. And Sterling Moore is not very good. Sterling Moore he returned to practice, I want to say, yesterday. So it looks like he's going to play and is after a multi-week absence. So, yeah, I like Golden Tate this week, and I'm not usually a Golden Tate fanboy, but especially on DraftKings at 6,800, I think he's cash game worthy. And considering you have Larry Fitzgerald there at 6,800, that you have, Mike Evans, people are still going to play at 6,900, Chris Hogan at 7,000. There's a lot of guys around him that are going to be owned more than he will be. So I think you can get him at really cheap, low ownership. And I think that he's even I hate to say it. Like again, I never say this about Golden Tate, but I think he's actually tournament worthy too.
If you look at some of their game scripts too, like there's some of the reason Tate's week to week performance looks weird is because they've just had a couple of weeks where they just didn't have to throw the ball really at all. Like the week against the Giants where I think it's like mid-20s worth of pass attempts or something like that. They've just been, we've said game script a lot, but they've been scripted in the way that they just haven't needed to sort of force the ball down the field. This game kind of lines up the opposite. So if you think that Stafford gets close to, let's say, 40 pass attempts in this game, his target share really should be there. I played him in tournaments every single week because I keep waiting for the breakout game from Tate, and it just really hasn't happened because I do think when the scenario lines up, he is in that, that Keenan Allen class of guys who should see double-digit targets on a week-to-week basis. It just kind of hasn't totally lined up. Some of it's narrative, some of it's just that it totally hasn't been there. But multiple weeks of double-digit targets, I do like Tate in this case a lot.
Yeah, and Marshawn Lattimore, the best cornerback for the Saints. He doesn't even go into the slot, so he should see. Marshawn Lattimore is probably going to be covering Marvin Jones a lot of the time. So again, I like Golden Tate. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned him on the show.
Hogan? I know he's got it done the past 4 weeks, but I watch him play, and I'm not super impressed. Like, he gets open all the time, but besides that, he's not a dynamic football player. And I mean, I guess getting open is part of being a football player, but I can't trust him in cash games.
Well, it's like a question of what do you trust? Do you trust that he's Tom Brady's clear red zone guy, or do you trust, or is it that he's just not a huge target guy, right? Or is it somewhere in the middle? Because when you're Tom Brady's red zone guy, that's a huge boost, right? That's basically like the best opportunity you can have in football. If he's the guy that you're going to be looking for, they're going to be specifically drawing up matchups to get you into one-on-one situations. Then maybe the touchdowns aren't completely run hot. If they're even a little bit run hot, though, he's not that good of a play, right? So because he just doesn't get targeted the rest of the time. And so if there's even a dip or a slight regression in touchdown performance for him because, they get Gronk back or it just doesn't happen or because of the way the game lines up, then he actually isn't. But if the touchdowns are for real, then they are. You know what I mean? It's a weird math problem with Hogan. He's a clear, like he's the opposite of Keenan Allen because all of his performance is basically touchdowns. So do you like that his touchdowns continue and the targets tick up, or do you like that Allen's targets stay the same and his touchdowns tick up? I think I would choose Allen between the two of them because the touchdown thing does make me a little bit nervous.
Yeah. Now, guys, for cheap plays, I'm looking. There's nobody that really stands out to me. Maybe Rashard Matthews for cash games. I wouldn't dare use anybody else in cash games that's super cheap. How about you guys?
I don't think you need to go down that far in cash games at wide receiver this week. Robbie Anderson at 4,400 is tempting, but I'm not going to do it. I don't
know about cash. I like him for GPP though.
Yeah, he's a solid GPP play because like the Patriots aren't getting a pass rush, and if they don't pressure Josh McCown, he takes his shots downfield to Robbie Anderson. I do want to mention two guys, one being Brandon Cooks. The reason I want to say Brandon Cooks is because Scott Barrett did some neat research in terms of cornerback matchups and what Brandon Cooks does against fast cornerbacks and what he does against slower ones. So he's going to see a lot of Claiborne this week. Morris Claiborne for the Jets. They signed him. He runs a 4.54 40. Okay, so in his research, Brandon Cooks has demolished any cornerback who runs greater than a 4.45 40-yard dash. So obviously Claiborne is much slower than that. So if Cooks can, if he gets him in coverage one-on-one, which is what they've been doing with Claiborne, I think Brandon Cooks could have a blow-up type week. Now, don't trust him in cash because he's 7,600. He's a boomer bust player. We know that. But in a tournament, I think it's very well worth the shot. And my other one is Terrell Pryor. Terrell Pryor against San Francisco. I'm not a Terrell Pryor fan. If you guys listen to the podcast, you guys know this. I'm not a fan of him, but I think in this matchup against Rashard Robinson, who has really struggled with speed this year, he's allowed T.Y. Hilton last week, 177 yards. You go back to that Thursday night game against Sammy Watkins, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. If there's one thing that Pryor does well, it's run fast. And he should be able to get behind the secondary, especially with Samaje Perine. It's just a very boring run game for them. They're not necessarily a run-first team. They're going to rack up a lot of carries, which is why Perine's fine in cash. But again, if you're looking for an upside play, 5,700 on DraftKings, Terrell Pryor, I like an awful lot.
Yeah, Cooks is my favorite GPP play. I was going to mention Terrell Pryor too, and I thought you were going to beat me over the head with a stick for that one, Tags, but I'm glad you're on board with it. Anyone else you want to mention here, Doug, before we move on to tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, those guys are kind of fall all in the same category for me, I think. Taking a huge L on Pryor this year because I loved him coming into the season, and it just really hasn't panned out, sort of like him smoking Peters in that game against KC. But he's a guy I'm a prior truther probably still, because I still think that the upside is there for him. It just kind of hasn't completely worked out. Cheap guys, you're right, there aren't that many. I don't mind. It's weird. He's very unpopular or unsexy here, but Adam Humphries only 4,000. If you think that Evans is going to draw full Peterson coverage and just is going to have trouble getting targets there, secondary option, they've shown that Humphries can kind of make it happen from a possession point. It doesn't strike me as having huge upside. I don't mind it as a pivot in cash if you're just really trying to save somewhere in the wide receiver range, because it's very difficult to do this week on DraftKings. I don't mind, it's funny. I don't like watching him play, and I hate this team, but Jarvis Landry is still seeing a bunch of targets from Cutler when they actually have the ball. He did catch a touchdown pass last week. He's the king of the one target for 1 yard kind of thing that most other receivers don't do as it seems like as much as he does. But for PPR, he still is in that range of guys who targeted. I just wish the Miami offense was, 30% better than it is, because it's Cutler. But Cutler has thrown his way a lot, and the fact that he's thrown him to him in the end zone strikes me as having some upside in a game where they're sure to be playing catch up.
So guys, tight end, there is value galore. Ryan Griffin is 4,500 on FanDuel. He gets Cleveland. We know that's a great matchup. We talked about these guys in the last show too. AJ Derby has a great matchup against the Giants, who might be the worst against tight ends. We've got Evan Ingram against Denver, and he's really the only wide receiver on the team. I know he's a tight end, but I think he's going to get quite a few targets. George Kittle against Washington. They've been using him a lot. I've read that some people think he's going to be a superstar. He's very good. And then Hunter Henry against Oakland. I like all of these plays. I can't really make up my mind on them. Doug, who do you like?
I don't like any tight ends, to be honest with you. I kind of just hate the tight end position in general. I'm not saying that. I agree with the names you threw out there. There's a couple more as well. Tight end is just it has seemed like such a dartboard territory this year, because
it's like kickers, basically.
It really is. And part of the problem is, outside of Zach Ertz, and I guess Kelsey out, and he had that one game where he had a game where he had like one target and 11 yards or something like that. So the problem with a lot of these tight ends just on a week-to-week basis is, except for Ertz, there's really no tight end in the league that's higher than a quarterback's third read, right? And so when that's the case, and really some of them aren't higher than fourth, and when that's the case with a lot of these guys, you're going to have so much variance around the position that I've taken to, on a week-to-week basis, making a lot of the same lineups and fitting in the guys that you mentioned, because I think that basically for my cash game strategy in tight end has been hit on 66 to 70% of the guys, and then that and kind of get home, right? So like last week, it's Witten has a huge game and Ingram gets zeroed, right? They're the same price. And Austin Seferian-Jenkins was in that group too. So basically what making cash games where having two of those three guys, the lineups are all kind of the same, and trying to get the touchdown upside on two of them, let's say, or the target share on two of them. It's a long-winded answer to say I don't like any of them, and I kind of like some of them.
Okay. Tax, who's your guy?
Honestly, it's tough, man. Hunter Henry, by the way, we are there, boys. Like, it's finally happened. The Chargers finally woken up and said, we need to get Antonio Gates a little bit more on the bench. Hunter Henry has now officially played more snaps than Antonio Gates, which is positive. I think he played 76% of the snaps in week 5. So trot him out there against Oakland. They really struggle against tight ends. Yeah, at 4,100, his price still hasn't caught up to his snap count and what he's starting to see. And the fact that Phillip Rivers, he targets tight ends. Doesn't even matter which one it is. If you want the guy who's on the field getting the snaps, and Hunter Henry just happens to be pretty good at football. I think another tight end that is going to be completely underowned is Martellus Bennett. I'm going to keep going back here because, as Doug mentioned, we hate the tight end position. It's like the worst. It legitimately is the worst thing to project every single week, because if someone scores a touchdown, they automatically finish as like a top 12 option. Well, in 3 of the 5 games this year, the Minnesota Vikings have allowed a touchdown, and Martellus Bennett has been getting the targets. So at some point, he's going to catch touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers. It's going to happen. And considering the tough matchup that Jordy Nelson has this week, Devontae Adams doesn't have the greatest of matchups. I just think it could be one where Martellus Bennett happens, and he's dropping in price rapidly. 2 other ones, Austin Hooper, 3,500. Yep. We saw him get 7 targets once Mohamed Sanu went down last week, Julio, or 2 weeks ago. I think he's a solid play at 3,500 in a tournament. And in cash, if you really, really want to save at tight end, you can go down to Zach Miller, 2,900. He seems to be a favorite of Mitch Trubisky. He is the pass-catching tight end for the Bears. And considering that their wide receivers cannot get separation and teams are going to continue to press them, Zach Miller is going to continue to be a favorite and continue to see targets, because I talked about this on John Hanson's show earlier this week, in that Mitch Trubisky, the problem that he's going to face every single week is that opponents are going to blitz him, and they're going to do man coverage, and they're going to stay in these wide receivers. If they can't separate right away, Trubisky's going to be running for his life. And what happens then? He looks for a security blanket, and that looks like it's Zach Miller. They improvised on a couple plays on Monday night, so look for Zach Miller, 2,900. He's really cheap. Baltimore, if you recall, they're the team that allowed the Jacksonville Jaguars to throw 3 touchdowns to Mercedes Lewis. So I think you can definitely do worse than Zach Miller at 2,900.
What even exasperates the tight end problem, is that DraftKings dares you to play them at their prices. Like, so DraftKings prices the tight end so low that you actually probably wouldn't even need to think about it all the time. But then you see guys like, Higbee 2,500, Jesse James 3,100. These guys aren't exciting, except that they allow so much salary just movement that it's really the only reason they stay relevant on DraftKings, at least, because the prices are so low that sometimes they're just daring you to play 2 tight ends every single week, which makes the position for me even that much more frustrating. Sorry, I know I interrupted you, but it's been the tight end position has been a constant state of pain, at least for me, this season, in trying to project, because a lot of these guys, they just all project in the same range. The Cameron Brate is also there as well. So I don't know. The tight end has been a pain point for sure.
I've been cleaning up playing 2 tight ends every week. I'm doing it again in cash games. They're just so stupid cheap. And there's a couple guys that are going to get some targets. So, just picking on Cleveland, picking on Oakland, picking on the New York Giants, and I think your money for tight end. Now let's move on over real quick. Defense, special teams. I think this is an obvious one. In cash, just play the Broncos against the Giants, right?
Well, this is like the scenario where if you were a high school team, you would cancel the rest of your season because you'd be worried that your players were going to get hurt. Like they've seen, this is starting to happen in high schools now, where you take a look on the field and you're like, we're starting all freshmen and sophomore, and we're playing a quad 4 school. They're just going to get killed. So the rest of the season's canceled, and we'll just come back in 2 years when these guys are a little bit bigger. I really feel like that's the situation with the Giants. Can you remember a scenario where a team had like something like 14 implied Vegas points, an NFL team? It legit never happens, and that's where we are with the Giants here. It's really uncharted territory in terms of how bad they could possibly be this week, and so it seems like the place to really pay up for defense.
Yeah, the Falcons are probably my favorite play in cash, just because, like I said, going over to DraftKings, you don't have the Broncos defense, but yeah, that play just seems like too easy. But the Falcons at home against Jay Cutler and the Dolphins, who have really struggled, yeah, I mean, that's where I go. Honestly, there's not too many plays on defense that I'm excited about this week.
I like Houston at home against Cleveland. I like Jacksonville against Jared Goff. I mean, I know the Rams have scored a lot of points, but it's Jared Goff and it's Jacksonville's defense. So I think those are all solid plays too.
I don't mind the Redskins against the Niners. The Niners offense still isn't very good. They can't figure out what they want to do at running back. Neither of the options seem all that good. I mean, they've kind of benched Hyde a little bit, and it's unclear about what his role in the team is now. They don't really have anyone else in the passing game outside of Garcon, and they still have Hoyer as the cornerback. So I don't mind. The Redskins are a little bit cheaper, 3,400. Vegas likes them. Really, there's a lot of teams here in sort of pick 6 territory because of the high lines, and teams are going to have to play catch up. There's going to be a lot of really bad quarterbacks forced to throw a lot of passes, and whenever that's
Patriots,
I mean Bears, Niners, the Patriots are in a good situation here against the Jets. There's just a lot of quarterbacks, like you said, the Texans, quarterbacks that are. Whenever you can get bad quarterbacks throwing a lot, that's a really good place to be for opposing defenses. And I would say like 3 or 4 teams at least check that box.
For GPP, I also like the Buccaneers at Arizona. I mean, their offensive line is in shambles. Carson Palmer throws quite a few interceptions. The Chargers against, they think Derek Carr is going to play, but maybe it's EJ Manuel at the last second. If it is, low ownership, could be money in the bank. Chargers get after the quarterback too, so they could pile up the sacks, get a few turnovers, maybe a touchdown. It's defense, so I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot. You have to get that touchdown if you want to cash in GPP. So good luck figuring out who it's going to be each week, but I think there's some pretty good cash plays. All right, Doug, that's all for the show today. We really appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. Much appreciated. Always fun to talk football.
And for those of you listening at home, we've got 3 more shows coming up next week. Make sure to tune in. Subscribe on iTunes if you haven't already. Leave us a rating and review. Take a screenshot and send it to us at contest@fantasypros.com. We're going to be giving away a year's free subscription to Fantasy Pros. And if you've already got it this year, you'll get free next year. So make sure to send those contest@fantasypros.com. Also, make sure to enter the $3 contest on DraftKings.com/fantasypros. And if you deposit for the first time, you get in for free. We're giving away a lifetime membership to fantasypros.com. So make sure to do that one. Also, thanks to the sponsor of today's show, draft.com/pros. That's PROS. and you'll get free money back up to $100 for your deposit and notifications when Tags and I start drafts so you can play against us. From Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.